Welcome to the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution of the United States. The Executive Director of the Virtual Center is Dr. Bill O'Brien. He's also your host for this discussion. And here he is, Dr. Bill O'Brien.
Thank you very much, and welcome to today's program. This is the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution. I'm Bill O'Brien, and I sure am pleased to be with you today, and I welcome you to today's program. I hope your weekend was an enjoyable one. I know that if you're in the part of the country that we're in, West Virginia, southern West Virginia, if you're in the eastern part of the country, I know that the weather cooperated this weekend, and it's sure cooperating today so far. This is one of the hottest days that I can see. And I will tell you ahead of time, just in case I give myself away today, that I'm not sitting in air conditioning. So if if you pick up signs that I may be sweating a little today, it's because I really am. I don't know whether any way you can appreciate this or not, but I'm a Santa Claus fan. During Christmas, the whole house I've got Santa Clauses everywhere. I've got one in the kitchen with an apron on and a chef's hat. And anyway, in my study here where I'm doing the program, I have a 3-foot-high Santa Claus here that's wrapped in a fur coat. And the temperature today is about 87 degrees and very humid. And I keep looking over at this Santa Claus, and I keep saying to myself, if you don't sweat, I won't sweat. So anyway, it is a pleasure to be with you today and start of a new week. Let me open with an announcement. Tomorrow we're going to be doing the program an hour earlier. I've just kind of clarified that. We'll be on Eastern Time tomorrow from 3 to 5 for those that listen live. And I know that many of you record these programs and listen to them later and respond to them later. It's a part of a changing technological world that it's going to take me a little bit of time to catch up on. But I know very honestly that's the way a lot of folks in this day and age have to function, and I understand that. And it's my challenge to essentially adjust to that. But tomorrow evening here in the Beckley area, I'm going to be sworn in as president of our local Rotary Club here, the Beckley Rotary Club. And that process, that installation program begins at 5:30 tomorrow evening. So I've got to be off the air and out of here in time for that. So we will be doing our program tomorrow from 3 to 5. And I just kind of I'll try to remember to mention that again as a reminder. Our phone number, again, if you are inclined to call, and we do encourage you to give us a call, our phone number is area code 304-658-3333. That's 304-658-3333. My email address, and I want to basically thank those of you who send emails. I'll make a comment on that in a second. My email address, waobrien906@gmail.com. That's waobrien906, all one word, and it's IEN O'Brien 906@gmail.com. Received 3 or 4 really powerful emails since our last program, and of course that was last Wednesday. And received one today about the Second Amendment. Very, very informative link to a piece about the Second Amendment. And in fact, I responded and thanked the person who sent me the email, and talked about the fact that it's obviously in the cards that we're going to have to return and do something in the not too distant future on the Second Amendment, because it always elicits conversation and interest. As well it should, and I think it's a program that we've been kind of dancing around by making references to it when we were looking at the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights themselves, and all the rest of it. It's very, very important issue, especially in today's political world. And so I appreciate the email, and it's prompting me to try to find the time to do a little bit of research. There's a couple of things I want to check out on the Second Amendment before we take it on and do a program on it, because I think it's it's a very, very important issue. It interests a lot of people, and it's something we really need to address. I had mentioned when last we were together that there was a report that had come out on education, and of course it seems like every time we seem to be moving towards the bottom, so to speak. Every time the numbers are down and people become really concerned about what's happening in education, whether it's higher education, K through 12 education, or all of it, it seems to me that there is usually a report. But I was mentioning in our last program that a piece by David Brooks in the New York Times made reference to this study that came out, this report that came out on higher education put together by a commission on the social sciences and humanities, and the value of this education in our whole educational landscape in America. And that article came out, I believe. Let me get my dates straight. David Brooks's article came out on June 20th, which was last Thursday. So when we were together last Wednesday, the reference I made to that study was an article in the Chronicle of Higher Education by Dan Barrett, and Dan had put together a piece for the Chronicle of Higher Education, which appeared on Wednesday, and he made reference to this report put out by the Commission on the Humanities and Social Sciences. It's a special commission that was created in response to the request of very prominent members of both the Senate and the House. In fact, the 4 members of Congress who requested this report, Senators Lamar Alexander, Republican of Tennessee, and Senator Mark Warner, Democrat of Virginia, along with Representative Tom Petrie, Republican from Wisconsin, and Representative David Price, Democrat of North Carolina. Those were the 4 who requested the calling or the putting together of a special commission on the humanities and social sciences. It was a blue ribbon panel that was formed by the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. And last week, they came out with their report entitled The Heart of the Matter. And what they were basically saying, effectively, in the title was that humanities and social sciences education remain at the heart of what the value of education in America is all about. They always have been a key part of that education, and they continue to be a part of that education. And then the report goes through a number of recommendations as what needs to happen in order to revitalize our education generally, but more specifically the role of the humanities and social sciences in that education. And I mentioned last Wednesday, when I first recognized that there was such a study that was just coming out, that we would be devoting a program to it, and I do want to do that. I want to follow through on that. It's a very, very important report. It's one, very honestly, that I feel very, very comfortable talking about, because it's something that I've lived with for the last 50 years. I've done a lot of research on education. Not only was I in it, both at the middle and high school level, but also at the college and university level, and at the graduate school level as well. But at the graduate level, my major area of emphasis in teaching was in history of American education. So I feel that, very, very comfortable talking about this topic. I think many of you who listen regularly know that because it seems like I go back to it over and over and over again. Not only do I feel it's very important, but it's something that I feel very comfortable talking about. And so I think that a study like this is very, very important. I have very, very strong feelings in a number of areas that this report touches on. I've been reading the full report. You can get it online. It's called the Heart of the Matter. The report itself, with appendices and everything else, is 92 pages long. But the actual narrative of the report is about 60 pages, 61 pages, I think. And then the last 30 pages are appendices, letters of support for members of Congress and various other things. But the report itself is about 60 pages long. But it's well worth reading. And in fact, that's one of the points David Brooks writes his piece on Friday in the New York Times, and he devotes his article to this report as well. And David Brooks makes the point that the report is very, very worthwhile reading for everybody. If you go online, you can get the full report, or you can get a synopsis of the report, which is just the executive summary as to what the report covers, and then the major objectives of goals of the report. What does the report recommend in which areas? And I think it would be remiss on our part if we didn't go into this. Not only because the value of the report itself, but I think in a program like this, in a virtual center for the study of the Constitution, there is no question that one of the challenges of the American Republic, one of the things that the founders have done for us, it seems to me, is issue us a challenge in setting up a Republican government like ours. You remember the very famous statement in 1787 when Ben Franklin was leaving the convention hall, and somebody on the street asked him, "What do we have?" And he said, "A republic if you can keep it." The point is that we were given a form of government that requires tremendous citizen input and involvement in order to make this system work. We've had our ups, we've had our downs throughout history. We've made reference to a number of those on this program. But the fact of the matter is, the nature of the political system we have is unique in the history of the world. John Adams made the point that this is the first time in the history of man that the people to be governed have been asked to put together and approve the very system under which they will live. And the system is built upon maximum input on the part of the general population, on the part of the citizenry. We looked in detail at reports like Benjamin Rush's Mode of Education Proper in the Republic. We looked at Thomas Jefferson's proposal for universal education in Virginia even before the Constitution was drafted and ratified. We are familiar, of course, that Jefferson was instrumental in the establishment of the University of Virginia in Charlottesville in the early 19th century. So many of the people that we're dealing with who were instrumental in setting up our political system were also instrumental in promoting the need for education as a key ingredient to making this work.
Hey, Dr. Bill.
Yes, Bob.
Before you get too far into the meat of your subject matter, you've got a caller on the line. Jeff wants to discuss a couple of the issues that you raised toward the end of the block of programs last week.
That'd be great. Go
All
right ahead.
Stand by.
Thank you, Bob. Hi, Jeff.
Hello, Dr. Bill, are you there?
Yes, I am. How are you?
I'm busting my chops and nobody cares. I'm only kidding. The reason why I listened to your program last week, and I really wanted to go over a couple of things. And one of them, you mentioned the leaders have to put up ladders, and they have to know which wall to put the ladders up on.
Yes.
And I think that we're talking about education systems collapsing, and because we don't have enough money to take care of it. the political system is working the way it's supposed to work, from what I gather, from the way the Constitution was written. It protects the minority. And the minority in this country is the very wealthy, who is actually taking control of our government and manipulating the government with the way the economy is run. If we look at the environmental system, there's no reason to blow mountaintops off or to have fracking, because realistically, it's only economically sound for the very wealthy. It doesn't make any sense. So the walls but you still have to put the ladders up on these walls because they're falling down. So we have to take care of the problems that are obvious. But what we're not looking at is the basic reason why these walls are crumbling is because we have something like a dome that we don't even see, that is surrounded, if you can envision this, is a huge dome, and it keeps on dropping these invisible bricks that are crumbling our walls. And we need to get some kind of a scaffolding to fix that problem, because the system has never been, it doesn't work because of the way it's been manipulatively moved because of the economic system. Am I making sense, or am I?
No, you're making sense. I'm understanding you. I'm having a little bit of problem. Understand? It's not what you're saying. It's that you're a little bit muffled, but I'm picking it up. I think I'm picking it up pretty good, Jeff.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, let me try to get off of this. Is this a better connection now?
This is great. That's great.
Okay. I put it on the speakerphone so I can not hold the phone to my ear. We have 88 degrees here in New York State and very high humidity, and I'm up in my attic because I'm on my other computer. And
we've got the same thing.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's very hot and humid here as well. I'm not in my attic. I'm in my study, but there's no AC here, so I can relate to you. We're conducting a discussion and talk about it in the heat of the day.
Anyway. The point I want to bring out is that how can you expect to fix any of these problems politically if we're in the economic system that doesn't allow it to work? I mean, we as I said, we do have a solution for this, but if you had a chance, look up that human energy renewable measurement on Wikipedia. I think that's the best one we have out there.
I did look at it when you first sent the email, Jeff.
So you can see where I'm going with this. The economic system for 6,000 to thousands and thousands of years. I don't know how far back. I don't like percentages, and I don't like to go back forever. But this is obviously cannot work because we don't have a way of measuring. And what you guys are alluding to is human behavior and the basis for humanities to have a quality of life is all you guys are saying. And it's not just the Democrats saying that; the Republicans are saying that. The Tea Party is now. I just want to bring that up. You can do something with it maybe. And the other thing I wanted to bring up last week, you brought up something called, I call it collectivism. In other words, the group, our whole group has to set up some kind of rules and regulation, and a lot of people call that collectivism. I'm trying to break it down to the simplest terms so people can understand it.
Sure. And
the big guys, the elite group, is trying to control the majority of the people through the way the economic system's set up, and the word nowadays, I guess, that's the buzzword is the elitists. But what I'm suggesting is that you need a certain amount of collectivism. Like I think you were talking about last week. You were talking about the way the government is bugging our phone lines. I don't agree with that. But what I'm saying is that we need a certain amount of collectivism. That means we have good roads, good schools, clean air, clean water, clean calories, quality of life as far as how we live, like you're in a study, and I'm in a place that's very comfortable, even though I don't like air conditioning, so I keep it off. But there are people who don't have studies, and people who don't even have houses. But we need to be able to let people, if they work 20 hours of labor anywhere in the world, they should have a comfortable place, a good quality of life. And that's what we're all talking about. So without the collectivism to get this message out, you can't have the individual person to be able to think properly. They're too busy trying to make ends meet or trying to support their family.
I got you. I think that, Jeff, are you still there?
Yeah, I am. I'm love that.
Okay. I understand. I understand what you're talking about, the whole idea of collectivism, but I think, and again, maybe I'm being the eternal optimist here, but I think that the ability of the few to control the system, as you talk about, as you were referring to it, is in large part because many of the things that we've been talking about that you refer to aren't happening. I believe the potential of this republic is the potential of making this system work for more people than any other system in the world.
I concur with that. I concur with that. I absolutely think it's very possible, but it's not, because of the way the economic system runs. It makes it almost impossible to do, because there's no measurement on the value of a human mind and a human intellect and labor. Once you put a value, a base value on, I don't care how we do it, but if we put a base value on that, we need to value a human being, and once we have done that, now our systems can work. Now when we put the ladder up on that wall and we fix it, it'll stay fixed. But if we don't fix the economic system, it can't possibly work.
Right. But it seems to me what you're saying is that the economic system, as it's currently working, is working against this.
Amen, brother. Amen. And I'm not even a religious guy.
But all right. But okay. But the question is then, because the economic system and everything we're talking about are inconsistent, it seems to me that leaves you two options. And one is to find ways to make the system as we have it, as people have it, and make it work. The other thing is just to concede that we can't make it work because the economic system is working against it. And I'm
not suggesting that. I am not suggesting that one bit. I'm suggesting something very, very simple. As a matter of fact, I hate to throw out websites that people can learn from, but there's one of them called Money as Debt. It's a great website. It doesn't give you solutions, but it shows you how money is created. Money as Debt, and that's only a 47-minute cartoon, and I think it's a must for everybody in the world. Everybody who wants to learn anything, they should see this. I've seen many of them similar to this, but that's the best one I've seen. And the other thing is Zeitgeist Moving Forward. That's a long documentary. It's very informative. Again, it doesn't give you any major answers, but it talks about a resource-based economy. It's a very interesting thing to see. But the only thing I am saying is that if we can get an accurate, a minimum accurate measurement or a base measurement for what intellect and human beings are worth, a base measurement, not a top measurement, then we can, and we say that measurement is not valued in currency, but valued of quality of life. In other words, the primary thing when you work 20 hours, taking care of your mother, or bringing up a child, or being a musician, or being a doctor or a writer, just 20 hours of labor will give you education primarily for you and your child. Now, the more education you have, the more educators you're going to have, and you'd have more more doctors and more, just generally across the board. Then you're also going to have free food, and the food is clean water, clean air, and clean calories. And then you're going to have something you are proud of, a place to live. So you have your education, your food, and your shelter. That's the 20 hours of labor. And all we need to do to make this happen is just get the measurement in place. And we can do that now with the social media and radio programs such as Head On Radio and other similar programs.
I see.
The other thing we need to change, once we get this measurement where we have groups all over the world now doing this. We have them in Sweden, we have them in India, we have them in the Philippines. It's all over. There are little groups popping up with this concept. Then the only thing we need to change is the way we do the gross domestic product. And then all our work, all the political system falls into place because a spotlight is put on everything. The education system falls into place. The environmental system falls into place because now you can see what everything's worth. And that's all I'm trying to say. Did I make it clear enough or not?
I understand what you're saying, and I'm trying to get a handle on how the arrival at this value is going to be the key ingredient in making the value respected. I guess what I'm saying is the people who are most in need of some sort of an appreciation of the value of human life already value it. It seems to.
But there's no way of. The problem is we have all these Occupy groups all over the world now. I wouldn't say in every community, but there's quite a bit of Occupy groups, and they are basically saying there's something wrong, and right. they're out there protesting and saying there's something the matter. But in this economic system, there is nothing the matter. If it behooves the wealthy to blow mountaintops off to get coal out of it to make a profit, that's perfectly fine in this economic system. If it behooves them to frack the oil and poison our water supplies in this economic system, it's perfectly normal. What I'm suggesting is that we have a minimum measurement, and it cannot be done in a currency. It has to be done in the quality of life to gain those three things I've mentioned: education, food, and shelter. Once we've accepted that 20 hours of labor and intellect gives you those three things on a worldwide basis, you basically are going to stop wars. Not all wars, but if you're not, you have a quality of life that's worthwhile.
Yep.
Then the only thing we have to do is figure out how we have to change, and the world's getting there now. They do want to change the way we do the gross domestic product, or the GDP, or the gross national product. So,
do you think
you have to think out of the box?
Do you think that the very establishment of this measure is going to, in and of itself, produce change in the economic system, or do you think it's going to create unanimity among people who need to appreciate what the number is going to reflect?
I think it will do both.
Okay.
I think it'll definitely do both. Once we understand what we're talking about, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the reason I'm asking that is because is the value of arriving at the measure, is that to the people who are going to derive benefits from that, or is the effort to come up with a meaningful measure aimed primarily at influencing the economic system or the people who run it?
What I'm suggesting is, I'm suggesting a minimum wage that gives a good quality of life to everybody across the globe. But I'm not suggesting that we take any wealthy people down, because that's their problem. If they want to have a gold-plated, we did a program the other day, and a friend of mine drives a Chevy Volt. He's a very wealthy guy. That's a $50,000 car. I used to have a Prius, and I went to a Ford a Ford Focus, and he was saying that my car is worth $50,000, and it's the best car going right now, other than, you know.
Yeah.
And I said to him, wait a second, why is every car in the world, if we as a human race realize it's the best thing for the environment, that's what they should be making.
Uh-huh.
Okay, what my wife is saying to me is you must say the measurement will keep honest people honest. You're still going to have people who try to manipulate it, and it shines the light on corruption. So that means so once you put a measurement there, it's like me telling you, you know, it's hot here, and we both know it's about 80 some odd degrees, between 85 and 90 degrees in both places. We both agree to that. But if I told you it was 200 degrees here, you would know that I'm lying.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
So we have the measurement to tell us. If you go to the hospital, if you go to the...
Here is a common language around which we can all communicate. In other words, it's a guarantee that we're all going to be talking about the same thing and knowing exactly what we mean by what we say.
We will know what we're talking about. With right now, the economic system is totally subjective. I'm suggesting we put an objective portion on, which will still have some subjective numbers. Now, if you're a professor and you want to, and you're more ambitious than someone else, and you want to spend 10 years learning about something, or a doctor, you should be worth more than the person who decides they don't want to do that. But you're not worth 1,000,000 times more.
Right.
But you can make 1,000,000 times more than that. If you can make 1,000,000 times an hour, but you know you have to put back to the system because of the inherited knowledge that you have. So the guy sweeping your floor can go ahead and put his kids through school and have a good quality of life.
Right.
I'm not saying we get rid of the system as we have now. I mean, I like the capitalistic system, but it's gone amok. We need to be able to make sure that we have a quality of life for everybody. And there are certain people who and I'm not saying not to be ambitious. Louis Pasteur and Einstein didn't work because of money. You're not doing what you do because you're getting paid for it. You're doing what you do because you feel you have satisfaction from what you're getting, and you want to help the society around you. Am I right, wrong, or am I wrong?
Exactly right. You're exactly right.
So I don't believe anybody. People tell me, well, those lazy people won't do anything. Well, I'm sorry. If you put somebody in jail and stop them from doing anything, they go off the nut. People have to work. They enjoy working. But if you let them, if you get rid of this impediment about having to survive rather than just work, the work will flow. You see where I'm going with that?
I see what you're saying, Jeff. I see what you're saying. It's a different way of looking at some of the issues that we're talking about. I think it's a very, very intriguing concept. I'm just trying to get a handle on what the end game is, you know. I mean, the end game is improvement. I know that, but I don't mean that. I mean, it seems to me that what you're saying is that if we reach this universal acceptance of the idea and the values that we assign to different aspects of life, then we're going to create the kind of common language which is going to improve our ability to communicate, and then we're going to be able to demonstrate to each other some of the issues that we're not able to communicate effectively at this point. Am I right?
I'm suggesting that you're right about we get the language straightened out so we know every human being has a value worldwide. And then once we know we have that value, we must change. The only thing we have to change, and that can be done simply enough by the way we do the GDP. The GDP is totally insane the way it's done now because it has to grow 3% a year every year. So last year it's 3% more, 103% instead of the 100% it was last year. So it keeps on growing exponentially. We can't. That's what's going wrong with our system. We can't keep on doing that. So what we do is we now have changed. Once we get the measurement in place, we help a country. The GDP is measured on how well each country gives their population their three things: their education, food, and shelter. That's
Right.
how we help a country. If they cannot do that, and we see they're trying, the world then gives them not money, but natural resources, whatever they require to help that humanitarian effort. And that's how we measure the GDP. We have to go from a dog-eat-dog economy to a humanitarian economy. And that's all this measurement does. It gives you a humanitarian economy. And once that's in place, the legal changes take effect. But meanwhile, no one has a way to measure it. If the occupied groups say, "Listen, I'm worth this much,"
Yeah.
and you guys will put, if you're a scientist or a professor and you spend 20 years working on a cure for cancer, why should a guy who's working in Wall Street who's doing nothing but manipulating money that does nothing at all make $1 million a day? There's something radically wrong with our thinking in this economy, and you don't have to be an RPI graduate to figure this one out.
Let me ask a question, and this is not. It's just something that occurs to me, and I think something we need to think about. But we keep going back to the issue of the value of every human being, and the fact that we need to come up with a way to measure the value of every human being, doesn't that, in a sense, demean what being a human being means?
Actually,
in other words, I don't have a problem recognizing the value of the human being. What I'm trying to do is figure out what kinds of changes and how we make them in a political system so that so our entire system becomes more respectful of the value of the human beings, not only in our political system, but in the whole world.
Well, that's the whole point of this measurement. It's what we're talking about is the value of a human being in the economy, not in the actual sense of God or right now the economy is a belief system. If you believe in gold or you believe in the U.S. dollar or you believe in something, it's just like believing in God. And if you believe in it, by the way, it's real. The economic system, every economist I've ever spoken to, say very simply, it is truly a belief system. And that's why it's so important to have people believe in what we're doing. The reality, as I'm saying, is that the economic is totally subjective because it's a belief system, just like you would believe in Jesus Christ or Muhammad or whatever religion you want to believe in. But I'm suggesting that we can put a subjective measurement, an objective measurement on the basic economy, which has never been done in ever, as far back as we could go. So, and we have the measurement. We didn't. By the way, I'm sorry to say that we didn't get this measurement because we were terribly smart. We got this measurement by accident, looking for what a renewable energy is worth. So that's how we got the measurement. We actually, it was just like horsepower. What happened was there was a professor named Dr. David Borton. He's a physicist, and he's into solar and renewable energy. And I said to David, David, I need a measurement for what renewable energy is worth. And he said to me, I got that. I said, what do you mean you got that? He said, you're calling me at 9 o'clock at night. Please call me at 8:30 tomorrow morning because I'm marking papers and I'm tired. So I called him. I didn't sleep that night. And he said, the measurement is very simple. We have 5,000 hours of human labor and intellect from across the board, from several different schools. I don't know which schools they are off the top of my head, all over the country. And it takes 5,000 hours of human labor to produce 1 million BTUs. Now it doesn't matter what the number is. It can be joules, it could be watts. It doesn't matter. But what matters is he's saying, and I've always known this, that human beings are in fact renewable energy. We have from the sun. We eat. We get our food from the sun. We are all human beings, and that's why China does so well. They have so much renewable energy. And I said, David, let's break this down so we can understand it better. Let's divide the 5,000 hours into 1 million, times it by a 20-hour work week, just for the fun and grins of it. And then we'll just say that any human being working 20 hours a week will be entitled to this one block of 100, whatever the currency will be. and that will give them their education, food, and shelter. I went in, I'm going faster now because I think we made the point already. But that's how we got the measurement. It's just like horsepower or degrees or any other thing we can think of. But once we put the measurement in place, then the only thing we have to do is the way we do the GDP.
Yeah.
And now you've changed the whole world because the entire world believes in this economic system, which is a belief system. If I don't want to be Jewish, I can back out of my Jewish religion. Excuse me? No, my wife is as passionate as I am about this topic, and she's telling me stuff in the background. But what I'm trying to explain is I can back out to any. I can back out of anything I want to back out, but the economic religious system is what it is. I cannot get out of. So I must put some objective value on it, and then we have take the computer programs and figure out what a maximum tax structure or maximum number could be, so you put back to the system.
Let me ask a basic question, and I'm kind of guessing that people listening might have the same kind of question. If basically the need for this is based on the assumption that we've not been successful up to this point in being able to demonstrate the value of every human being. So in a sense, now we're coming up with a new way to measure that value.
Exactly,
And the reason is
right.
And the reason is because there are people out there that aren't appreciating that value unless we come up with a different way to measure it.
Exactly my point.
All right.
Susan and I went to a conference in Croatia last year about this time in Split, Croatia, and we had 120 countries there. That's almost the whole world. There's only 190 some odd countries in the whole world. And there was 120 countries represented. It was called the, I just went blank on the name. Anyway, it was called, anyway, we were one of 20 presenters. It was called the Tesla Conference.
Uh-huh.
Tesla Conference, and it was about theoretically, it was a conference about changing to an energy currency. So we somehow or other, I think we had an email out to somebody, and someone recommended we go to the conference, and we were invited to speak at that conference. So we went. We stopped everything, and we went to speak at that conference. The countries who loved what we were saying during the lunches and dinners, but they all ran over and wanted to talk about this, and they thought it was great. The other countries said, wait a second, you can't do that. You can't measure what a human being is worth. I said, why not? I said, don't you think that gold is all, you got to look at gold, because gold's a really, oh, no, I'm sorry, gold has theoretically, according to the economists, stored value. But the reality is, it's a belief in the gold, and the reason why gold was such a valuable thing, it had a specific weight and measurement. Right. Now what I'm suggesting is the intellect that got the gold out of the ground and the labor that got the gold out of the ground is the true stored value. And as we accumulate more and more knowledge on how to get that gold out of the ground, we can mine that stuff, but it's no longer worth anything. It's strictly a commodity that people believe in that they should buy. It's not real. What the real value is intellect and labor. But it's almost impossible to put a value on that because of the way the economic system works. However, I'm sorry to go on like this, but I got to get this all out because I'll feel much better. Mrs. said, or Micey said, I call it Mrs. said.
You feel better.
Mrs. said, and I'm taking him out of content now, so yeah. But he did say, which I love, he said to have human beings have to have a commodity that they all have access to all over the world that they can peddle or sell. I'm taking it out of, of course he didn't say it like that, he had a German accent, and he said it better than I did. But what does every human being in the world have access to that they could sell? Which is what was that? What does and that's their intellect and their labor. If you choose to be a doctor, or choose to be a philosopher, or choose to be a mathematician, or choose to be an electrician or a plumber, you are worth something. As a matter of fact, if I need to have my roof fixed and I'm not sick, I'm going to pay a guy a fortune to fix my roof because I need the roof fixed. If I'm stuck in a hole and I can't get out, I don't care who's walking by. How much is it worth for me for that guy to throw a rope down to me? So
right.
the value is not subjective. There is an objective number, and and it doesn't really matter what the number is. We may be wrong with our number, but at least we can see. Just like 600 years ago, people believed that conventional thinking was the world was flat. Now, of course, Friedman says the world is flat again. I don't buy that, but anyway, that's fine. But what I'm saying is that we know now it's round. So I'm saying just let's think about changing the way we need to fix the dome, so when we put the right ladders up on the different walls that are collapsing, once we fix those walls, the dome will stop falling down on us. And I think the way to fix that, I'm not alluding to it, I'm suggesting it.
Right.
The way we fix the walls, we put a measurement on what a human being's intellect and labors are. And, as a matter of fact, we spent 40 years trying to promote renewable energy, and the reason why it has not happened, not because it doesn't work. It doesn't work because the political system wouldn't allow it to work, and that won't work because the economic system won't allow the political system to make it work. So we're still blowing mountaintops off. We're still fracking, poisoning water, and there's no reason for that. It doesn't matter how much money we even print up worldwide to help humanity.
Jeff, let's give people a chance to digest this, because first of all, it's really intriguing. It's extremely complicated. But at the same time, since we're talking about the value of human beings, I think it's something that everybody needs the opportunity to try to get their arms around. And I want to do that.
Thank you very much. I didn't mean to take up this much time.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
It had to be done.
Because, I guess if I have a question that I really want to leave you with, it's, if you have to come up with an alternative way to demonstrate the value of every human being, then when you do that, is that a win or is that a loss?
Every human, okay, I'm going to answer that question because I have definitely thought about this very carefully. In the very beginning, human beings require education to know how to eat, what to eat, and they need education, food, and they need shelter. Then they get to a certain age where they've learned stuff, and now they're productive. I don't know what that age would be. Let's say 12 years old till, let's say, 60. That's a very, very short time in life in the scheme of things. And then we get to be old like you and I, and we start to dribble, and then we need people we have to learn all over again, like they have to use computers because times have changed, and we need to have people help us take care of ourselves. Because we can't do that as much as we'd like to. So actually, human beings have a pretty simple, it's not this complicated. So all we need to do is just put the value on that. And once we put a value on it, I think it could be arranged. But right now, the Dems are blaming the Republicans are blaming the Dems, the Tea Party is, I can't even listen to it anymore because they're spinning their wheels. I need to get some facts, and I need to get everybody together to get this thing to happen. And the only thing I see which ladder we need to fix is that dome you were talking about. Let me let you get some more calls in, but I hope I was effective.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Get yourself a glass of water because I know you need it. Thank you.
I got to do a show. See you then. Bye now.
Let me give the phone number again and give people an opportunity to react. Our phone number here is 304-658-3333, and I don't think we used up our allotted time, so the number still works. Area code 304-658-3333. If you want to comment on the issues that Jeff was raising about this measure, by all means, feel free to do that. I think Jeff, the one thing that we can say is that Jeff had the opportunity to basically clarify what his issue is. And again, I think it's very obvious that he has thought through this. It makes sense to him, and he has absolutely bent over backwards trying to explain it to all the rest of us. And I for one, appreciate that very much. I feel a lot more comfortable moving in the direction of trying to demonstrate the value of human life of every human life as we've traditionally tried to do it. Although I think what some of the points Jeff makes are very, very important to consider, because throughout history there have been conscious efforts by people who have tried to find ways to reject what it is that information, that view of humanity was telling them. We have come up with race and class and various other things to put artificial values on certain human lives in favor of other human lives. I mean, I think that's what an awful lot of history is. And I think what Jeff is trying to do is use that mechanism, that way of thinking, to come up with a solution to those problems. And you gotta admire that, and I do, and I appreciate it. We're at 51 minutes after the hour. Again, our phone number, area code 304-658-3333. We've got about 10 minutes left in our program. Let me make just a couple of general comments about this study, because the study that I'm talking about the humanities and social science, is very, very significant within the context of what Jeff is talking about, because it basically suggests that we have real problems in the way we educate our people, all of our people, but especially in our society. And I think part of that is because what Jeff is trying to basically find a solution to, we have not effectively been able to address yet. And this report is, unfortunately, is one among many. But let me share a little bit, and this is kind of a tease, because we don't have that much time left in this first hour, and I want to get, because I really think that if you go back to the New York Times last Thursday. Actually, it's Friday. He writes on Friday. David Brooks's piece in the New York Times last Friday, which was the 21st of June. You'll find this piece. It's entitled The Humanist Vocation. And it deals with the contradiction in our education system between education for a career versus education for what I believe is literally teaching people what being human is about. That's what I believe the value of a liberal education is about. And that's what this article is about. David Brooks served on this particular commission that put out this report. One piece of information that you may, I found this interesting. You may find it interesting as well. The commission that created this report, Commission on the Humanities and Social Sciences, was a creation of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. If you look back and do your research, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences was created by John Quincy Adams when he was President of the United States. And as you know, John Quincy Adams was President of the United States prior to the period of Andrew Jackson, 1824 to 1828. And if you remember your U.S. history even a little bit, you may remember that John Quincy Adams' presidency was not successful. John Quincy Adams it goes down in our history for a lot of reasons, but his service as president was not one of them. But the thing that makes John Quincy Adams' administration particularly significant, it seems to me, is the role that he envisioned for government. In his inaugural, he laid out a vision for government to take on the issue of promoting the arts and sciences and the classics and research and all the rest of it. He felt This is very early in the nation's history now. His father, John Adams, was the second president of the United States. John Quincy was president in the early 19th century, 1820s. So this is early in our history, 30 years, if you will, after the Constitution is developed. And already John Quincy is laying out an aggressive, visible, assertive role for government in leading the nation in respecting and supporting the arts and sciences. Because he believed, as did his dad, and as did any number of the founders believe, that the ultimate value of a political system like ours is a system which potentially offers the greatest respect for the value of the individual human being, which is just what we had our conversation with Jeff about. So I think it is very, very important that the Academy for Arts and Sciences was created through the initiative of President John Quincy Adams years and years and years ago. I think that's significant. But beyond that, David Brooks sat on this commission. He is championing the report. He is speaking to the value of the report. He is speaking to the challenge that the report places on those professional educators on whom the nation depends for leadership in these areas. I mentioned last Wednesday very briefly, and I want to mention it again very briefly because we don't have that much time in this hour. I think that's part of the major problem with this issue. I think the people that we need to depend on to explain to us why the humanities and social sciences are so important in our educational landscape are dropping the ball. I don't think that they've done a very good job explaining the value of what they teach. Let me be a little bit specific. In some cases, how many I don't know. I hope it's not many, but I'm kind of thinking it might be. I'm of the opinion that many of these people aren't doing that good a job explaining the value of the arts and sciences and the need for what we call liberal education in the 21st century because they really aren't sure themselves. I think what we have done is we have brought to the fore a number of people who are trained experts, authorities, scholars in certain disciplines, in certain areas of learning in the humanities and social sciences, which would be literature and the arts and music and culture, philosophy, communications, language, and the social sciences would be sociology and psychology and political science and all the rest of it. I think we have people that are scholars in these areas, but they really don't grasp how their particular areas fit into the total landscape of the education of the general population. I think this report is a call for them to do that. I'm going to say something really that's going to sound terrible here. But I think it's incumbent on us to make the case for them, to help them understand why they need to make the case and why they need to do it successfully. The alternative, if we can't make the case, is to look to people like Jeff who are trying to come up with another way and saying maybe we can do it this way because the way you're talking about isn't working. I guess maybe I'm not ready to give up on it quite yet. But anyway, I would like to open our next hour. We're going to take our break. It's 1 minute before the top of the hour. When I come back, I want to share with you the statements of a truly humanistic history professor that David Brooks quotes in his article. And then I want to get into the whole issue of the meaning of the humanity itself. And it's tied up with the Edward Snowden situation. So hang in there. We got another hour to go. But let's pause and take a break. It's the end of our first hour. You're listening to the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution. And after we take a 4 or 5 minute break, we'll be right back. Thank you, Bob Kincaid, and welcome back. If you've been with us through our first hour, we thank you for staying with us. If you are just joining us on today's version of the Virtual Center for the Study of the U.S. Constitution, we welcome you and thank you for giving us a few moments of your valuable time, and we mean that very sincerely. Our phone number, area code 304-658-3333. That'll get you on the air. And we do invite you to call and share your ideas and your thinking with us. We had a caller in our first hour, as some of you know, who did that and shared with us a very, very intriguing idea about basically measuring the value of humanity and what human beings do. And I think it's an intriguing concept. And I think Jeff, the caller, did a tremendous job. In what really wasn't a very, very easy thing to try to explain it in ways that all of us could grasp it and begin to understand it. But we look forward to hearing from you. It's very, very important that all of us, that we have an opportunity to share our thinking and to interact with other people who have something to add to what we might say. And of course that works both ways. Those people who have something to say will benefit as well and have a right to benefit from things that we might think about what they say in terms of adding to it or pointing out flaws in it or whatever it might be. I think this kind of conversation is absolutely essential in today's world. I don't think there's enough of it. I think the communication, the technology for improved communication clearly is there. But I would suggest to you that the communication itself is something we really need to work on. Because more often than not, we tend to talk beyond each other. We tend to talk right past each other rather than actually communicating. I have said, and I'm going to repeat this, because I think it's important. I taught for years and years and years. And until I began to do a program like this on radio, I did 4 or 5 years on terrestrial talk radio, and then I've as many of you know, I've been on the Head On radio network with Bob before, and now I'm doing it again. The one thing I learned from doing radio, whether it's internet radio or whether it's terrestrial radio, the one thing that I learned, which I think is very, very important, apologize for the phone, is that I thought in all the years that I taught that I was a good listener. But one of the things I learned is that I wasn't. And one of the things that this kind of a program requires is that you listen carefully to what people say. And it obviously is very, very important that in order to communicate that we listen to each other. Too often, much of our communication is really not communication because we spend the time while the person we are interacting with is speaking, we spend the time preparing for our comeback, for our next statement. In other words, most of what we call communication, unfortunately, tends to be emphasized on what we do and what we say and how effectively we say it.
Hey, Dr. Bill.
Yes, Bob.
With that having been said, I think this would be an appropriate time to let you know that you've got a caller.
Okay.
Betsy is calling from Texas.
Oh, great. Thank you. Hi, Betsy. How are you?
Hey, Dr. Bill, how are you?
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. How is the weather in Texas? It's got to be hot. It's got to be hot.
Well, I mean, I think it's 101 today. So I'm hearing you and Bob talking about 80s and Jeff and thinking, oh, well. I mean, on the other hand, my apartment's highly air conditioned. So.
And we're not used to for us, 80s is 100. So anyway, it's wonderful to hear from you. How are you?
I am good. I am calling actually to talk about the, I'm sorry, what is this called? The report from Health and Human Services, and I think that it's missing the focus, and I think that you're missing the focus. And I'm sorry to put it bluntly, but my doorbell's going to ring in about 30 minutes, and I want to make sure. Anyway, where I feel like that it's missing the focus is that it's saying the importance of literacy, the importance of reading, writing, speaking, listening, which I think are very important. The problem is that in this country, we have gotten away from the way we define literacy. And literacy now is how well you do on a literacy test. Ability to write is how well you can write on a paper that is graded by a rubric, where the rubric never considers your ideas. It only considers the structure and whether you have a 5-paragraph essay and whether you have topic sentences, and each sentence is supported by details. And I think that the way we have defined that both affects the kind of teaching that happens. It affects the quality of teachers who are coming out of teacher programs, because it affects the quality of students going into teacher programs, and that it serves to undermine completely the lofty goals on page 1 of the report.
All right. Wow. You've said a lot. It's very, very, very significant what you said, Betsy. Your basic concern is that the way we define literacy focuses more on the mechanisms of communication than it does on the actual communication.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And thank you for rephrasing that perfectly.
Well, I don't know. I hope I did. I mean, because I that's what I'm hearing you saying, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think one of the problems I've always had, and you got to understand that I'm a 21st century Luddite. I mean, I can't help it. But part of the reason is I'm too old to pick this stuff up as fast as it's changing. But one of the concerns that I had in teaching over the last several years about PowerPoint is that many of the people I teach with, colleagues, people that I see in various disciplines, have gone to the whole idea of using PowerPoints in their classrooms.
Yeah, I use them all the time.
The thing that I noticed is that for the most part, and again, I'm sure there are exceptions, but for the most part, the medium has become the message, in the sense that the whiz-bang of the PowerPoints, whether they have catchy cartoons and phrases and the colors and the attractiveness of the PowerPoints seems to get more attention from the instructor than the content of what's on the PowerPoint.
I mean, I think that because I use technology extensively, I actually use technology more than almost any teacher I know, and I use a lot of those things. We had, in addition to PowerPoints, we had interactive, I'm trying to remember, innovation station kinds of things. We had all sorts of technology. And to me, the biggest reason to use them is because I can save them from one semester to the next.
Yeah.
That's the reason to use it. But as far as what it says, it has to teach what I want to teach, or it's of no use to me. And it has to, I spend almost no time on the bells and whistles. I would rather actually use someone else's PowerPoint and then add my own things into it.
Me too. And
we had a couple of days this year with my 5th graders where one day the front computer, the computer that's attached to the projector, was broken, and another day, I think the screen itself, I don't remember. But I ended up going old-fashioned and doing things, I mean, less old-fashioned, but whiteboard and different colored markers and taking the kids through different steps. And they found it a refreshing change. And they liked the fact that, unlike the PowerPoint, I could do the PowerPoint. I don't have to look at the students as much because I'm looking at the screen. But when I use markers on the board, I'm turning around, in part for classroom management, but also turning around far more often to check for understanding.
Yeah.
And the kids picked up on that very quickly.
Yeah. And I got to say, I haven't known you that long, and I obviously never met you, but I feel like I know you. But the fact of the matter is, if there's one person that I know wouldn't be guilty of what I'm talking about PowerPoints, it would be you. And I want you to know that. But
honestly, that to me is much less of an issue than the whole idea of what do we mean when we say that we're teaching a skill, and what do we mean when we say that we're teaching STEM. Because as long as we're teaching kids to think and we're giving kids the tools to further their education, and we're sparking the interest in that education, and we're sparking the interest in something so that they want to continue learning, I don't think it matters at all whether we give 200 minutes to math and science and 100 minutes to language arts, or whether we give 200 minutes to language arts and 100 minutes to social science. I think that the specifics of how many minutes per week, which is what a lot of this curriculum stuff comes down to, I think all of those things matter very, very little, as long as we're aiming to teach kids to think, and we're aiming to teach kids to use the information that they're getting. I think that having kids read a book because the book is at the right level, and because at the end of the book they're going to answer comprehension questions, does not encourage anything that we would call education.
No.
I think that teaching kids to read things that give them information and that spark more questions and that answer some questions, it doesn't really matter much. It matters a little, but it doesn't matter much what the specific topics are and what the specific books are. I think that we do need in the humanities books that make kids think about big issues, books that make kids think about the really big questions.
Yeah.
But I honestly think that a good teacher can take, not anything, but a good teacher can take a large number of types of books and get kids thinking. And a bad teacher can take the best literature in the world and turn kids off to learning and turn kids off to reading.
You're right. And I think, one of the things that I've seen about PowerPoints that really, I've seen a lot of instructors that I know have basically used PowerPoint, and what they've done is they've taken their lectures and put them on slides and made them into a PowerPoint. And then what they do then is they just read the PowerPoint.
Well,
and in a sense, it's their
I know people who do that, and those are the professors who have absolutely empty classrooms.
It is deadly.
Where what the students do instead is just download the PowerPoint.
Right. It is absolutely deadly. And unfortunately that's and I think that's what you're saying about literacy, that we have taken the mechanisms associated with literacy, the ability to write and penmanship and sentence structure and paragraph structure and all the rest of it, and we have basically made that the basis of literacy, because that's what we measure. And in effect, we're losing the whole point. The whole purpose of writing is to communicate. And we're not putting the emphasis on the communication part. We're putting the emphasis on the structure and the mechanism part. I think you're right on.
I think we measure way too much. And I looked at I only looked briefly at the humanities, the HHS report, but I didn't see anything in there that tells me that they're getting away from measuring everything every week.
No,
We lost, I have to tell you, we lost a day a week, period, to testing.
Yeah.
My students had a little bit more. The other fifth grade students on my team had virtually nothing but testing every single Friday.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. And
It's
what
absolutely unbelievable.
we're using them to generate data that we can write reports about. I mean, that's,
I've been going for job interviews, and one of the things that I'm pretty clear about when they, ask me why I'm leaving, where I'm leaving, one of the things that I'll say is that as much as I would like to use data to help me drive instruction, I have to teach the children in front of me and not teach the data from last week's test.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
I will absolutely go over things that a lot of kids got wrong, or if a same kid gets 4 things wrong and it's the same skill that he got wrong 4 times, yes, of course I will work with him on that skill. I think that these things are of value, but I think the amount of testing that goes on in schools today is, if parents knew, they wouldn't stand up for it. If parents knew how much time kids spent in testing and in test preparation.
It's frightening.
I'm very glad that my son is in college.
Yeah. Well,
I will tell you, he went from a private school, kindergarten to 4th grade, public school 5th to 12th, and public school sapped his love for reading. He was a reader. He was an absolute reader the day he got to public school. And within 2 years, he had almost no interest in reading.
Oh, that's so sad.
It's very sad.
Yeah. Betsy, thank you so much for calling.
Oh, thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you. You've given us a lot of food for thought. You always do. Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye. We're at 20 minutes after the hour, and our number, area code 304-658-3333. That's 304-658-3333. I had in my hand before we started this out, before Betsy joined us, a quotation, a statement from David Brooks's article last Friday about a history teacher that he had at the University of Chicago, whose name happened to be Carl Weintraub. It's a name I'm not familiar with, but obviously David Brooks is. But after listening to Betsy, I especially want you to hear David Brooks's quotations from Carl Weintraub, because I think after her call, you're going to understand what David Brooks wants to get across to us as to why the humanities and social science are such an important part of our educational landscape. The reason it's important to keep that in mind is because everything that's happening, finances, politics, and everything else, is working against the general recognition of the value of humanities and social sciences in today's education. So in a sense, we seem to be heading in a direction that is just the opposite. And that's what this report is designed to do, is to stem the direction in which we're going. And this quote from Carl Weintraub, as shared by David Brooks, I think will make a lot of sense after the conversation we just had with Betsy from Texas. Carl Weintraub was a history professor at the University of Chicago. And David Brooks is sharing this from a note that he wrote to one of Brooks's classmates, whose name is Carol Quillen, Carol Quillen is now president of Davidson College in North Carolina. But let's listen to Professor Weintraub. Teaching Western civilization, Weintraub wrote, here's the quote, seems to confront me all too often with moments when I feel like screaming suddenly, "Oh my God, dear student, why cannot you see that this matter is a real matter, often a matter of the very being, for the person, for the historical men and women you're looking at, or are supposed to be looking at?" Weintraub's frustration. He feels like screaming at students and saying, "Oh my God, why can't you see that the people we're looking at, the issues we're discussing, are real issues in the lives of real people, real men and women? We are trying to basically get into their skin enough to understand what they are seeing in the world that is confronting them." My role as history teacher, Weintraub is saying, is to try to get you into their skin. Why can't you give me a chance to do that, is what Weintraub is saying. And these next 3 paragraphs are quotes from Weintraub. I hear these answers and statements that sound like mere words, mere verbal formulations to me, but that do not have the sense of pain or joy or accomplishment or worry about them that they ought to have if they were truly informed by the live problems and situations of the human beings back there for whom these matters were real. The way these disembodied words come forth can make me cry, and the failure of the speaker to probe for the open wounds and such behind the text makes me increasingly furious. What he is criticizing in students is the dispassionate nature in which they are fulfilling their academic assignments, but it is very obvious to Weintraub that they really have not engaged the past to the point that they feel what it is they're writing about. That's the missing element. Weintraub goes on. If I do not come to feel any of the love which Pericles feels for his city, Athens, how can I understand his funeral oration? Everybody reads the Pericles' funeral oration about Athens. Here's Weintraub saying, if I can't feel the love that this man has for this city, how can I possibly understand the funeral oration? If I cannot fathom anything of the power of the drive derived from thinking that he has a special mission, what can I understand of Socrates? If we can't feel what it is that makes Socrates Socrates, if we can't figure out what his mission is, what he's doing, how can we possibly understand it and appreciate the power of what Socrates is telling us? How can one grasp anything about the problem of the Galatian community without sensing in one's bones the problem of worrying about God's acceptance? Sometimes, Weintraub says, when I've spent an hour or more pouring all my enthusiasm and sensitivities into an effort to tell these stories in the fullness in which I see and experience them, I feel drained and exhausted. I think it works on the students, but I don't really know. And then David Brooks ends his article by saying, teachers like that were zealous for the humanities. A few years in that company, leaves a lifelong mark. In other words, what he was saying is that Weintraub was one of those people who could actually feel what Pericles felt when he read the funeral oration that Pericles delivered to the citizens of Athens. And in feeling it, and in building in the enthusiasm and the sensitivity of Pericles into the presentation, into the class, Weintraub believes that he's making it possible for his students to understand what Pericles understood. But as he says, I think that's what's happening, but I'm not really sure. The fact of the matter is, and I think Betsy shared with us when she called, the fact of the matter is there aren't all that many instructors like Weintraub or Betsy who basically put their attention and their focus on what's happening to students as a result of what they as teachers are doing in the classroom. Back for a second to the comment that I made to Betsy about PowerPoints. One of the concerns that I have about many PowerPoints that I've seen is that the strength of the lesson, the strength of the instruction is incorporated into the PowerPoint. The fact of the matter is the real effectiveness of the instruction is what happens within the students once they're exposed to the PowerPoint. The emphasis is in the wrong place. The emphasis is not in the product that the teacher creates for the class. The emphasis needs to be in the response from students that the class initiates. And no report, I don't care how many pages it is, I don't care how much it costs to put together, no report on education is going to be effective until it's able to locate the focus of attention in the right place. And the right place is on what happens within students. The education is not the material delivered. The education is what happens in the students when they receive that information. And what Professor Weintraub is most frustrated about is that he's reading the words that the students are writing to him. And he said, I'm not getting a sense that any of the life, any of the feeling that has to be there is here. These students are fulfilling an assignment. They're going through the motions. They're giving me what they think I'm looking for. But there's nothing living in the communication. There's no life. There's no sensitivity. There's no enthusiasm. There's no apparent appreciation of the feeling that went into the initial experience or the initial activity or the initial speech or the initial letter or whatever the source. This is the reason why primary sources are so valuable. And I was encouraged by the report that came out last week on the humanities and social science. The last section on research talks about the instructional, the educational value of giving students the opportunity to actually experience the subject of research, to actually experience the benefit of conducting and communicating and explaining and writing up research. And that's really, it seems to me, what this stuff is all about. So again, I do want to, we're kind of in a situation here where we're almost into that report, and we've got less than 30 minutes left in our program, so I'm kind of thinking that we probably ought to go in this direction and save the other issue I had for another day. One of the concerns, let me share a couple of concerns about the report, and encourage all of you to give it some attention, because I think it warrants that. I think it's worthy of that. While the report addresses the issue of the humanities and social sciences, the responses to it suggest that there's a real concern from social scientists that they could be on the outside looking in here. I picked this up as I read the report. There seems to be a sense in the report of greater appreciation for the value of the humanities than there is attention to the value of the social sciences. The report almost treats the social sciences as if they're part of it, but we're really not sure how to make them a key part of it. And social scientists pick up on this. For example, one of the reactions to the report, this is in the Chronicle of Higher Education, one of the reactions to the report is written by Sally Hilsman, who is executive officer of the American Sociological Association. She speaks for the sociologists. And this is her reaction to the report. The social sciences are awkwardly and incompletely incorporated in the discussion, but not fully or in a particularly comprehensive or powerful way, she said. She's speaking to what she sees as a deficiency in the report. The deficiency is that there doesn't seem to her to be an appreciation for the value of the social sciences in the total educational landscape that the report is promoting. Here's another reaction to this from a social scientist, that the risk to the social sciences might be in being too closely associated with the humanities in the report. Our concern, this person says, is that Congress looks at this report and says, humanities and social sciences. Maybe we take social sciences out of the National Science Foundation and give them the equivalent of the NEH, the National Endowment for the Humanities. I think that would be something we'd feel very concerned about, he said. It almost speaks to a fear on the part of social scientists that they really can't make their case as effectively as the humanities folks can. The value of sociology, the value of political science, the value of geography, the value of psychology. It's interesting because I think more students tend to tie into psychology than many others, than many of the other disciplines. But there seems to be a concern on the part of social scientists, not only that the report doesn't make their case very well, but they seem a little bit uncomfortable about the fact that they're not sure they're going to be able to make the case at all. And this goes back to in this Chronicle piece on the report. One of the major concerns, and let me share with you, this is the Chronicle piece written by Dan Barrett the day after the report was released. And Dan says, the report's authors also direct several critiques toward academe, towards the educational community, the professors and the administrators in education. They fault a tendency among scholars to be too inward-facing with their research, an attitude that leads, they write, to academic self-enclosure, unquote. And here's a quote. If scholars in the broad humanistic disciplines expect the public to be more financially supportive, the authors write, they must make the case for the public value of their work much more effectively than they have in recent years. The report compares the humanities and social sciences to the emphasis that is being placed today on the so-called STEM disciplines, S-T-E-M. And STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And because of the emphasis on getting jobs, the tremendous emphasis on the ability of an education to get you a good job, the STEM subjects are attracting more and more students and more money. Because the belief is that the sciences and technology areas and engineering and math are going to lead the successful students into very, very rewarding career fields. The fear in the report clearly is that the humanities and social sciences are not going to be able to do that. Students are not majoring in the humanities and social science disciplines because the emphasis on getting a job is coming through. It's coming through to them that while they may want to study these things, there's no job in it. I would, how many times have I heard students say, I would love to major in history, but you can't get a job in it. And so the fact of the matter is, one of the things that the report does, which I think is particularly revealing, is that it gives some pretty profound data some statistical data that is quite disturbing. I'm going through the report here as I speak because I don't want to misspeak, and I don't want to basically paraphrase data. That's one thing about data. If you've got the data, you need to present the data. And let me share with you, this was particularly significant data to me. Let me share this with you. This is on page 26 of the report. And this is about history, the teaching of history. And specifically, it speaks to the results of the NAEP test, N-A-E-P, which is the National Assessment of Educational Progress. It's one of the best standardized tests in the country. And, of course, we just heard Betsy talk about the fact that her students spend one day a week doing nothing but taking tests. I think one of the most valuable is the NAEP test. But what this data does is give us the results for history achievement in the 4th grade, 8th grade, and 12th grades as measured in the NAEP tests, 1994 and 2010, the difference. And one of the things it suggests, it's frightening. One of the things it suggests is that in 2010, as opposed to 1994, the test results are showing that a larger proportion of the students who sat for this test are scoring below basic. We're not talking proficiency here. The different levels, there are 4 levels that the tests create 4 categories that the test results create: advanced, proficient, basic, and below basic. One of the concerns is that in 1994, too many students were showing below basic. One of the biggest concerns is that about 38%, close to 40%, I would say about 38% of all the 4th graders who took the test in 1994 scored below basic. If you imagine a line at 0 and assume that that's your base, 38% of the 4th graders who took the history test in 1994 scored below basic, below that line. In 2010, actually it had improved. Instead of 38% that scored below basic, the number looks to be, I'm looking at a bar graph here, looks to be about 25%. In other words, there was a significant improvement in 4th grade results from 1994 to 2010. However, the same years, 8th graders took the NAEP test. And in 94, more students, more 8th graders were below basic than 4th graders. Where it was about 38% among 4th graders, it was 40% among the 8th graders. But more disturbing still, the 12th graders who took the test in 94, 58% were below basic. So what is this telling us? It's telling us that as bad as the 4th graders do, the 8th graders do worse, and the 12th graders do worse than that. And then you look at the results in 2010, and in each case, there's an improvement over 94, but not enough. For example, on the 12th grade, 58% scored below basic in 94, 56% scored below basic in 2010. What that means is that if there is any improvement, it's insignificant. But let's go further and look at additional data. This gives the report credibility. Employers were surveyed about the whole idea of liberal education. But it's important what the employers believed liberal education was about. So here's the definition. Here's what the report is advocating and defines as liberal education. At a time when economic anxiety is driving the public toward a narrow concept of education focused on short-term payoffs, it is imperative that colleges, universities, and their supporters make a clear and convincing case for the value of liberal arts education. This case needs to be made to every relevant audience: students, parents, governors, and legislators, and the public at large. These audiences need to be reminded that the most successful Americans have typically benefited from such broad-based training, with early experiences often paying off in surprising ways, and that the ability to adapt and thrive in a world certain to keep changing is based not on instruction in the specific jobs of today, but in the developing of long-term qualities of mind, inquisitiveness, perceptiveness, the ability to put a received idea into a new purpose, and the ability to share and build ideas with a diverse world of others. That's the definition of liberal education that this commission put before employers. And basically they said, do you want this kind of education, or would you prefer a much more job-focused, job-specific kind of education in our colleges and universities? The results were astounding. 51% of the employers said that this kind of education, this liberal education, was very important. 43% rated it as fairly important. If you add them together, that's 94% of employers believe that liberal education is important. Only 6% rated it as somewhat important. Now the question put to employers is this: how important, if you were advising your own child or a young person you know about the type of college education they should seek in order to achieve professional and career success in today's global economy, would you recommend they pursue an education like the one described here? In other words, would you give this kind of education priority if it involved your own child? 3 out of 4 said that they would recommend the concept of a liberal education to their own child or to a young person that they know. 74%. 19% said that it depends. 7% said no. So 3 out of every 4 employers said that this is the kind of education they would want their own child to have. The reason that I think that this is important for us, all of us, is because the market is driving education in a totally different direction. We are being told that the cost of a college education is too expensive. We are being told that many of the jobs that are out there don't require a 4-year degree, that 2 years is enough. We hear all the time about people that say, I'm going to be a whatever when I go to work. Why do I need to read Shakespeare? Why do I need to know who Socrates was? Why do I need the classics? Why do I need writing and speaking and communication skills if I'm going to be an engineer or a mathematician or whatever? What I'm suggesting, and what makes this report significant, is that the direction of education in this country is going in a direction totally opposite to where people who really know think it ought to go. Most people, most of the justification for this is that this is what employers want. They want job skills. But the employers surveyed for this study say something quite different. So with just a couple of minutes left in today's program, what's the message here? The message is that parents, the people, many of the parents who are paying the bills, believe that education that doesn't directly lead to a job is fluff that they can no longer afford to pay for. the assumption is that education is not directly job related, then it's something we can't afford. It's time we can't afford to devote. And students are saying this, parents are saying this, government is saying this, Congress is saying this. One of the reports, one of the data reports that's in this report, I won't take the time to look for it now, is a report on the amount of grant money that's being allocated in certain areas, and the amount of grant money, of federal money, that's being put into the humanities and social sciences has decreased by more than 40% in recent years. 40%. So in a sense, we're going in a direction which is quite opposite from the direction that many employers believe, that I believe we need to be going in. So I think this is a valuable report. But I also believe that the people who are on the front lines teaching these subjects, unfortunately, are not able to make the case. Some of them can. But from my experience, too many really don't know how what they teach fits into a much broader, more humanity-directed educational landscape. I know people who teach literature who really aren't sure, other than appreciation for the literature itself, why students ought to be taking what they teach. They can't explain it. So I would suggest that this report speaks to a real challenge in our in education today. And it's a challenge which I feel all of us need to be aware of and be willing to take on. And let me close today's program with a suggestion that you might, in preparation for tomorrow's program. In today's New York Times, in the opinion section, there is an article on philosophy. It is an article entitled Privacy and the Threat to the Self by Michael P. Lynch. I want to take a portion of our program tomorrow and address this issue. It speaks to the Snowden issue of privacy. But it speaks to privacy in ways that heretofore we haven't really addressed yet. The whole idea of privacy being necessary in order that we can remain autonomous human beings rather than robots of somebody else. But that comes another day. It's in today's New York Times, Michael P. Lynch. If you get a chance to look at it, I would do so. We'll spend some time on it tomorrow. I want to thank you for tuning into today's program. I want to thank the folks who called, Betsy and Jeff both. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. We're at the top of the hour, and I invite you to stay tuned for Bob Kincaid on the Head On Radio Network. I'm Bill O'Brien. Thank you so much for listening. Have a good day.